Professor Cathrall adjusted the translation nodes along his cranial ridges as the xenobiology amphitheater settled into an expectant hush. 300 students from dozens of star systems filled the curved rows, their varied anatomies perched on seats designed through awkward compromise. This lecture was always popular. Fear had a way of focusing the mind. Today, Cathrall announced, his voice rendered into clean galactic standard, we continue our study of apex predators from high-mortality worlds. Specifically, auditory threat signals. Several students stiffened. Others leaned forward. This was not theoretical knowledge. These recordings were taken from worlds where survey teams vanished, where ships returned empty, or didn't return at all. Holographic panels flared to life above the central dais, displaying threat classifications and casualty ratios. Worlds ranked 7 and above. Death worlds. All known sapient species, Cathrall continued, share an instinctive fear response to certain sound frequencies. These vocalizations evolved to paralyze prey before the kill. A low murmur rippled through the hall. All except one student. In the highest back row, one seat reclined slightly farther than regulations allowed. A human male sat there with his boots resting on the desk ahead of him, arms loosely folded, expression unreadable. His data pad lay idle beside him. Jake Carter. Human exchange student. Planet of origin, Earth. Cathrall had already filed 3 etiquette violations regarding him. Our first specimen, the professor said, activating the audio feed, originates from Karsix Prime. The sound exploded through the hall, razor-sharp shrieks layered with subsonic pulses. Several students recoiled instantly. Feathers flared. Skin tones darkened. One gelatinous species partially liquefied in panic. The Korvathi students, whose ancestors had once been hunted by similar creatures, pressed themselves flat against their seats. Note the oscillation, Cathrall explained calmly. The predator induces vertigo before. That's, actually kind of neat, Jake said. The words were soft, but in the silence they landed like a dropped instrument. Cathrall's eye ridges stiffened. Human Carter, he said slowly, this creature has a documented kill rate of 72%. Jake shrugged without looking up. Yeah. Sounds a lot like an owl crossed with a wildcat. Confused glances shot across the hall. Owl, someone whispered. Cathrall clicked his mandibles in irritation. We are discussing apex predators, not avian analogs. I know, Jake replied. Just saying. Familiar vibes. The professor turned away, suppressing his growing annoyance. Very well. Let us proceed. None of the students noticed the way the room's tension had shifted, not from the sound, but from the unsettling realization that the human was not afraid. The next recording rolled without warning. A deep, rolling growl vibrated through the amphitheater, low enough to rattle seat frames. Several reptilian students excreted stress fluids instantly. One dropped to the floor in a defensive coil. This, Cathrall said, is the Draxian Sand Reaper. It hunts in open terrain and can feel vibrations through solid rock. Jake tilted his head. Ha! That's basically a pissed-off lion. The reaction was immediate. A Talrix student spun around, all 4 eyes wide. You possess creatures that produce that sound? Yeah, Jake said. Lions, tigers, bears. The translator pause lagged. Explain, bears, the Talrix demanded. Jake thought for a moment. Big. Furry. Eats fish. Mostly leaves you alone unless you do something stupid. The amphitheater buzzed with alarm. Cathrall raised a clawed limb. Human Carter, I must insist. Another sound cut him off. A shrill, metallic shriek echoed next, layered with clicking undertones. Panic responses escalated. Several students activated personal shields instinctively. Jake winced. Oof. That one's rough. Cathrall seized the moment. You see. Even the human finds this distressing. Jake shook his head. Nah. Just reminds me of a cassowary. What? Multiple voices asked at once, is a cassowary? Angry murder bird, Jake said. We warn tourists about those. The professor stared. One by one, the sounds continued. Each labeled as lethal. Each met with alien terror. And every time, Jake offered a comparison. Alligator. Wolf pack. Territorial moose. With each answer, the class grew quieter, not from fear of the sounds, but from fear of what kind of world produced a species that treated these noises as background information. Kethral's patience finally thinned. Enough, he said sharply. The next specimen is classified as extreme threat. The survey team did not survive. He hesitated, savoring the gravity of the moment. This sound alone has caused trained operatives to freeze. The room darkened. The speakers crackled. And then. A scream. High-pitched. Warbling. Almost human. Desperate and endless, echoing through the chamber like a soul being torn apart. Students screamed. Some collapsed. Neural translators spiked with panic errors. And Jake. Jake laughed. Not mockingly. Not cruelly. Just genuine, surprised laughter. Oh wow, he said, wiping his eyes. I haven't heard that in years. The room went dead silent. That, Jake added, still smiling, is just a cougar. Professor Kethral's coloration shifted to a deep, unsettled violet. What? He asked. A cougar, Jake repeated. Mountain lion. Puma. Same thing. They scream like that when they're bored, lonely, or marking territory. Silence pressed in from every side. You are telling us, one student whispered, that this sound originates from a non-sapient predator on your world. Jake nodded. Yeah. They live all over the Americas. Several students looked physically ill. And, your people survive? Kethral asked carefully. Well, Jake said, considering, most of the time. The professor sank slowly into his seat. You are aware, he said, voice unsteady, that Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. Jake blinked. Is that bad? The hall erupted in stunned murmurs. There is no Class 13, Kethral said quietly. Jake let out a low whistle. Ha! Guess that tracks. A student near the front gathered the courage to ask, how did your species endure? Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. We got smart. We got stubborn. And we stopped panicking every time something screamed in the dark. He gestured toward the speakers. Most predators rely on fear. If you freeze, you die. If you listen, learn, and adapt, you live. The professor studied him with newfound caution. You are not fearless, Kethral said slowly. Jake shook his head. Nah. We're terrified. We just don't let it make our decisions. The room absorbed that. Earth wasn't just dangerous. It was training. When the bell finally chimed, no one moved. Professor Kethral stared at the predator classification still hovering in the air, numbers that suddenly felt meaningless. All this time, he murmured, we believed survival depended on avoiding fear. Jake stood, slinging his bag over one shoulder. Fear's useful. It tells you something's there. What matters is what you do next. He paused at the aisle. Back home, he added, if you hear something screaming in the woods, you grab a flashlight. You don't assume it's the end of the world. Kethral watched him leave, his steps unhurried, his posture relaxed. The human had not conquered his planet by overpowering it. He had learned its language. And when the galaxy played its scariest sounds, humanity simply listened, recognized them, and kept moving forward.